Good morning, everyone. It's actually so fun to get to do that. Good, try it. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am the Reverend William Levwood, affectionately known as Rev Lev. My pronouns are je and je, and I'm so happy to be the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. As we begin our service, I invite you, as always, if you're in person, to silence your phones, and whether you're joining us in person or online, to center ourselves for worship by taking a deep breath together. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Stayed on freedom, woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom, woke up this morning with my mind. Stayed on freedom, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Connie Diamont, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. If you aren't new to Accotink, look around, and do you see people you haven't seen before or spoken to in a while? These people, like you, want to meet you. Help us live up to our mission of being a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection. By visiting this congregation, newcomers are in a transition moment, and people in transition are more open to new friendships. That means your new best friend may be sitting next to you this morning, and this is your chance to meet them. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer, or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online or in person, immediately after the service. We're so delighted that you could join us today, and welcome.
All right. We'll have more time to share about that later share with each other, connect with each other in our social hour after the service, and potluck today, and meal pack today. Today's service, this week our theme is practicing resistance. Timely. I feel like every month the theme could be practicing resistance these days. Last Sunday, we had fun with that through using the lens of the musical, Wicked. Today, we're going to look at the Occupy movement as an example for resistance. Next Sunday is MLK Sunday, which is probably more important than Easter for Unitarian Universalists. So I encourage you to attend next Sunday. We're going to be looking at his essay, The World House, and finding connections between that. And actually, you'll see it in the reading from MLK today in the service, the network of mutuality, the interdependence of humanity, theologically and in very specific physical ways in the modern world. So, but before we get deeper into the service, we have a practice as part of our Defending Our Democracy initiative to share some good news. So I've got some good news for you this morning. After the recent Supreme Court decision about the Chicago deployment, the president announced that he would abandon for now his efforts to deploy the National Guard in Chicago, Los Angeles, and in Portland. In another piece of good news, Pope Leo immediately ousted a traditionalist priest after his anti-gay slur was caught on a hot mic. That's the Catholic Pope, y'all. And closer to home, the 2025 crop walk this fall, had about 275 walkers, 17 from Accotink plus 7 spirit walkers from Accotink, and the total amount raised was just over $40,000. That's the first $40,000 walk since before COVID, and only the second $40,000 raised in its 30-year history. Only the second time that's happened. So that's definitely some good news. So with that good news inspiring us, let's say our covenantal words from our Unitarian Universalist shared values that call us to put love at the center and to work for justice and beloved community. I invite you to rise now for our chalice lighting words and to say these words on the screen all together. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. As an expression of the value of justice, we work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. Let's try that. And all forms of systemic oppression. All right. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared value of justice through the spiritual discipline of love. Please remain standing if you are in body or in spirit. I'm going to give a little intro to this song that we're about to sing together. Every week, Jewish families gather around the Shabbos table right before sunset on Friday night. And after blessing the candle lighting, the Kiddush is recited to bless the wine. That blessing thanks God for two things: for the creation of the earth, which we are called to care for during the week and to enjoy on Shabbos, and for freedom, which is honored by not working from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. Now, I'm convinced, I haven't heard anybody else give this drosh on this, but I'm convinced that the song we're about to sing from our UU hymnal and written and composed by cantor Linda Hirschhorn is a poetic English version of that Kiddush blessing. You'll see that it celebrates both freedom and the creation and care for the earth. So I invite you now to join in singing. We're going to sing it through twice.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle
Good morning. My name is Michelle Anderson, and I am the Children and Youth Spiritual Development Director, and I am so pleased to see you all here today. Our story today is called A Big Fish and a Hidden Jewel. It's a tale from Talmud, adapted from a telling by storyteller Cindy Rivka Marshall, with illustrations by Martina Peluso from another telling of the same tale. Frida knew her family was poor. You could tell by her dress, faded and patched. Frida knew that her family was poor. You could tell by what they ate every day. Potatoes on Monday, potatoes on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, you guessed it, potatoes. Except on Shabbos. On Shabbos, her parents would save their money all week to make that meal special. On Friday morning, Frida went to the market with her father, where every week her father bought wine and fish for that night's Shabbos meal. Shabbos, thank you. Shabbos. When we returned home with the food, it was time to get ready for Shabbos. Frida's father was a woodcutter, and on Friday she would help him gather wood before the sun set. The woods were owned by a wealthy landowner who lived in a large house at the edge of the forest. Frida and her father gathered fallen branches. Her father pruned trees carefully so they would still grow. Frida helped take kindling into the landowner's house as her father stacked wood by the fireplace. She was amazed by how enormous the kitchen was with its fancy silverware, and the landowner seated at the table holding in his hand a gold pocket watch inlaid with jewels. Later, Frida said to her father, "I wish you had a watch with jewels like that so you knew when to light the Shabbos candles." We have the sky and the setting sun to tell us when to light the candles, and we have our own jewel. We do? Look for it, my darling, tonight at the Shabbos table. The next week, while she was bringing in the kindling, Frida told the landowner, "You know, we have a jewel just like you." The stunned landowner was left wondering, how could that poor woodcutter have a jewel? Later, he became so curious, the Shabbos evening, the landowner walked down to the woodcutter's cottage. Standing outside, he heard everyone singing inside. And peering in the window, he saw how the home, though humble, was filled with laughter, kindness, and joy. When the landowner returned home that night, it seemed as if somehow this night was different from other nights. His house, though huge, felt more cold and empty than usual. To console himself, the landowner unlocked his chest of jewels, counting and polishing them one by one. Filled now with a strange hollowness, the next morning the landowner traveled from the town, crossing on the bridge above the rushing river that separated the town from the city. Once in the city, he went to the jeweler's, where he bought a new jewel, larger and more magnificent than any jewel he had ever owned. But fearing thieves along the road, he hid the jewel in a fold in his hat. On his journey home, he stopped on the bridge to gaze at the river roiling below him. Just then, a gust of wind blew the hat right off his head. The landowner watched for lonely as the hat and the jewel were quickly carried away by the current. Weeks later, on a Friday morning, when Frida once again joined her father at the market, the fishmonger motioned them over to the largest fish Frida had ever seen. Her father hesitated. A fish this big cost more money than he usually spent. But her father, dedicated to Shabbos and to being a generous host, counted out his coins, nearly to the last coin, and decided to invite a few more people to celebrate that evening. The fish was so big, Frida had to help her father carry it home. Later that day, as her parents worked together to prepare the fish, slicing it open, they saw something gleaming right there in the belly of the fish. The fish must have swallowed it up, her mother exclaimed. But not sure what to do with the jewel, as soon as Shabbos was over, her father brought it to the rabbi. The rabbi looked at the jewel, and then he looked at her father and said, "You honor Shabbos, everyone around you, with your generosity. Maybe, just maybe, this jewel is your reward." So her father took the jewel and sold it in the city, and then quietly gave away most of the money to those who needed it even more than his family. They did keep a little of the money for themselves so that they could invite friends, old and new, to their Shabbos table every week. One week, Frida's father even invited the wealthy landowner. The meal was filled with the joy of a community gathered together in gratitude and hope. After the meal, the landowner took out his watch from his pocket. Seeing the jewels gleaming from the watch, Frida said, "Father, do you remember a long time ago when you told me we have a jewel?" Wrapping his arms around her, the father told her, "My darling child, I wasn't speaking about the kind of jewel you can hold in your hands. When I said we had a jewel, I was speaking about the magic of Shabbos, the gift of being together. That is our jewel." Hearing this, the landowner closed his watch, put it back in his pocket, and joined in the singing.
This is in your order of service, but I want to talk a little bit about what happened this week. First thing I want to say is that this was always going to happen. Renee Nicole Good isn't the first person to lose their life to the cruelty of the current immigration crackdown. That's important to say. It's also important to say that she's white. It was a brutal attack, but part of it, why we're hearing about it, is because it was so brutal and public, and part of it is because she's white. Renee Nicole Good is also a queer woman, murdered by our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Her queerness and how that impacts how the story is being told and who is telling it, that matters too. But this was always going to happen. As soon as the crackdown started, with masked agents out in the streets, many of them newly hired, little more than vigilantes, and all of them emboldened. So emboldened that it has been only a matter of time before their so-called enforcement of the law became not only lawless, not only brutally violent, but deadly and murderous. This was always going to happen. And it will happen again unless we, the people, keep it from happening. Show up to work to keep it from happening. So we're going to keep showing up, right? Yes. We're going to keep protesting. We're going to keep marching. We're going to keep answering the call of love. We're going to keep standing on the side of love.
We are standing, oh, we are standing on the side of love. We are standing, oh, we are standing on the side of love. Kanyen cuentos, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos, siya hama, siya hama, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos, siya hama, siya hama, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos, 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 siya hamba, siya hamba, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos, siya hamba, siya hamba, siya hamaku kanyen cuentos.
Network of Mutuality by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted. Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that. We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war. One day, we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. We shall hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope.
So this sermon that you're about to witness, I actually preached for the first time 15 years ago when I was in seminary and living in Oakland, California during the Occupy Oakland movement. I remember the helicopters. You could hear them night after night. And it's disappointing isn't a big enough word for the fact that it still applies today, 15 years later. So I want to start by sharing that there are many stories like the one Michelle told this morning for our Time for All Ages. And I want to begin by sharing a similar story. In this Japanese story, or perhaps version of the same story, there are two brothers aptly named Generous and Greedy. A mysterious old man appears and rewards the generous brother with a magic miniature millstone, which provides him with whatever he wishes. All he has to do is turn the millstone to the right, and whatever he wishes for starts pouring out. And when he has enough, he turns it to the left and says, enough. Well, the greedy brother discovers this magic, steals the millstone, and being greedy himself, he's convinced that his brother will try to steal it back, so he flees, setting out in a boat at sea. And while on the boat, he becomes hungry. So he takes out some fish that he packed for the journey and thinks to himself, this fish would taste better with some salt. So he turns the magic millstone to the right and asks for salt. And the salt comes pouring out. Now, unfortunately, in his haste and greed, the greedy brother, didn't bother to learn how to stop the magic. So the salt keeps pouring out. The brother frantically shouting and jumping up and down in the boat, flailing his arms, claiming the election's been stolen. But to no avail, the boat fills with salt and keeps filling with salt and sinks, taking the greedy brother with it to the bottom of the sea, where according to this tale, salt is still pouring out of that millstone this very day. Does this story sound familiar? We live in a time when, like Brother Greedy, we have a magic millstone and no idea how to stop the salt from pouring out endlessly, threatening to send humanity to an ignominious demise at the bottom of the ocean, sending us to the bottom of the literal ocean because of the bottomless ocean of our own greed. I'm talking about climate change, among other things. In our story, the salt is fossil fuels. And our unstoppable greed pouring out from oil wells in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. The fossil fuels are like the salt, endlessly pouring, causing sea levels to rise, heating up the planet, leading to increasingly powerful hurricanes, to uncontrollable wildfires, to devastating droughts. If we place ourselves in the story, we are in the moment when the greedy brother is frantically shouting, "Enough! Enough! No more salt! Stop, millstone! Stop!" But the salt keeps pouring out and the boat is sinking. The boat, our planet, our blue boat home, is sinking under the weight of our greed. Joanna Macy calls the dominant myth of our time the industrial growth society, a false story telling us that growth can and should continue indefinitely, that there is no ceiling. But we know this isn't true. We know there is such a thing as too much. Now, the salt itself, whatever the salt is, oil in our time, in other times gold or land or even spices like salt, the salt isn't itself the problem. The magic millstone isn't even the problem. That magic millstone was used well by the first brother, guided by generosity. The problem is greed. And this is why in the fall of 2011, all over the world, people poured into the streets as part of the Occupy Wall Street movement with its rallying cry, "We are the 99%. Occupy Wall Street was a movement in opposition to the greed of the super rich 1%. I was looking up the statistics as I was preparing to share this sermon with you, and it's only gotten worse. It's just incredible. And the pressure had already, all the way back in 2011, been building for decades as wealth inequality, especially between the super rich and the rest of us, has grown exponentially since the 1980s. Now, in his prophetic wisdom, MLK named the three evils of his time: racism, militarism, and materialism. That was in 1967. And I just named that this climbing wealth inequality didn't begin its exponential climb until the early 80s. King's Poor People's Campaign was still in its early stages when he was assassinated in 1968. The mass protest that King was planning read like a manual for the Occupy Wall Street movement. In the words of my seminary colleague at the time, B. Schofield, King was, quote, organizing with a multiracial coalition of Native Americans, Chicanos, Appalachian whites, and urban black people, organizing to start an encampment in Washington, D.C., that would be a massive nonviolent army which would cripple the operation of an oppressive society. King said this encampment would have to be as dramatic, as dislocative, as attention-getting as the riots, without destroying life or property. He spoke about clogging the roads, shutting down bridges until the city was unable to function anymore. This is what the Occupy movement set out to do, with a similar vision of a large coalition united in their shared opposition to big money. This is the coalition we need now, and in support of a basic level of economic prosperity. Just a basic level, just enough for all people. Now, Rebecca Solnit has pointed out that the success of the Occupy movement shouldn't be determined by the changes it was able to achieve at the time. That its success shouldn't be measured only in legislative change, that the real power of the Occupy movement is the language it gave us, is how it diagnosed the problem of greed, the root problem, and more to the point that the problem is the greed of the 1%. And how in the service of that greed, the 1% are destroying the planet and taking all of us down with them in their sinking boat. The solution isn't ultimately those tents that were camped out, because the power of a tent is in the empty space it encloses. The power of a tent is the life inside it. The power of a tent is the people. I wonder how many of you remember the human microphone from the Occupy movement? Yeah? Instead of a PA system, powered, I might add, by coal and oil, the speaker's voice was amplified by others, repeating what they'd said, and repeating what they'd said, and repeating what they said, so that the whole gathering heard it, so that the message rippled out from the center. This practice of the human microphone was not just a practice of resistance. It was the embodiment of an emerging sense of communal selfhood. It was the practice of coalition building, the spirit made flesh of solidarity being born. The human microphone is a practice of amplifying every voice, not just the ones we agree with. Every voice is amplified by the collective so that it can be heard and included in the dialogue. This is a radical equalization and is rooted in a radical redefinition of selfhood. Every voice is honored as part of the shared voice of an emerging community. Every voice is held in the cloister of the community, arising from a shared silence, opening into a blossom of fire. What I'm telling you is at the center of this decentralized communal selfhood, there is a fluid vitality, flowing like a river, flickering like a flame, growing like a flower, and communing with this ever-evolving, interdependent communal selfhood connects us with the empty center, with the mysterious ground of being. You've heard me share this poem by James Wright before. It's the only poem I've ever put to memory. There is this cave in the air behind my body that nobody is going to touch a cloister, a silence, closing around a blossom of fire. A cloister, a secluded but not an isolated space, where the indefinable nature of the mystery is an experience of intimacy around which a community revolves. A cloister, a silence. The whole poem prepares us for this word, silence, so that we will experience it as it always is, but as we so rarely experience it. What is silence? It's the presence of an absence, and yet very much alive. As the poet James Wright makes sure we know, make sure we feel by giving this silence motion, shape, and a flaming center. A silence closing around a blossom of fire. And in this moving, embracing silence, in this cave behind the body, in this womb, there is life in all its contradiction and impossibility. The silence, the presence of an absence becomes a blossom of fire, a burning bush. God whose name is I am that I am. God whose name is I will become what I will become. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. A living, vibrating emptiness at the center. And here we are like Moses, being commanded to return and embrace life. Here we are like Moses, being sent out from that liberating center of existence with a mission. Here we are like Moses, called to resist oppression, sent out to free the slaves. Here we are like Moses. And from this center, this flaming chalice center, we're told in the poem, when I stand upright in the wind. We're told that when we answer this call, we will be empowered. We will be made courageous, that we too are like that flaming flower center, that even in our stuttering and our vulnerability somehow, like the impossibility of a blossom of fire, we are indestructible. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. When we remember the impossible possibility that is life, the blossom of fire, the burning bush, the flaming chalice residing in the center, then when it feels like we've hit a wall, or a Wall Street, or a blockade of ICE agents, or a large river, and Pharaoh's soldiers and their chariots, or the police and their riot gear are closing in on every side, if at that moment we remember the impossible possibility that is life, that is love, indestructible, lives on even after death, love. We see you, Renee Good. Indestructible life lives on even after death, love. Then we stand upright in the wind, and our bones turn to dark emeralds. And miraculously, the waters part. Miraculously, the Jim Crow laws are repealed. Miraculously, the unequal wealth is redistributed. Miraculously, the ICE agents are expelled from our cities and our neighborhoods. Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen? Amen. And as we pass through that wall of water that has been hemming us in, as the seas part, the unearned wealth of the oppressors drowns. As the ice melts and the waters and the walls and the wall streets come crashing down on the brother named Greedy, drowning in his own avarice. In their book, The Cultural Creatives, How 50 Million People Are Changing the World, sociologist Paul H. Ray and psychologist Sherry Ruth Anderson document many of the social movements of the 20th century. They divide these movements into ones focused on political activism, one's focused on spirituality, and one's focused on cultural transformation. And what their research shows is that movements that focus solely on political activism or solely on spiritual transformation are unsuccessful and fade away, while movements that integrate the political and the spiritual into a force for cultural transformation last and make lasting change in society. This is why I feel that focusing on the theological core of the Occupy movement, as well as the effectiveness of its political action, is so crucial. Why were people on the streets protesting against Wall Street? Because Wall Street puts profits ahead of people, because to Wall Street, we're isolated individuals, some of us winners, most of us losers. But as Dr. King said, we are bound together in an inescapable net of mutuality. An injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. When anyone loses, we all lose, because we are not isolated individuals. We are one interdependent community. I'm saying interdependent because we need each other. From the moment we are born until the moment we die, we depend on each other for our very survival. This is shown so beautifully in the story told earlier as Our Time for All Ages, a tale from the Talmud, transformed for our time by storyteller Cindy Rivka Marshall. The original version of the story shows the greedy punished for his greed, while the generous is rewarded for his good-heartedness. And there is truth in this. And insofar as it is true, we need to show up and resist tyranny and exploitation. But in the long run, in the deep time, there is an even fuller truth. Let the fact that a small minority have co-opted the lives and livelihoods of us, the majority, of the 99%, not hide from us our interdependence. Not hide from us that we are, in fact, in the end, the 100%. This is what I love about Cindy Rivka Marshall's adaptation. I'm going to point out to you what I mean. It embraces this deepest truth. Because I'm sure that growing up in our society so focused on material success, most of us can relate to Frida being hypnotized by the landlord's jewels in his pocket watch. Like her, we see the shiny jewel of material prosperity, the bling. If we grow up with this prosperity, we worry whether we'll be able to keep it. If we grow up without it, we wonder how we're ever going to get our hands on it. Papa, why don't you have a jewel like the landlord, we ask? Now, fortunately, the wise parent is also within us. The father figure whose wisdom is bigger. I don't know what you Taylor Swift fans thought I was going to say. The wise parent says to our inner child, the jewel is here. You already have it. See if you can find it. What a wise Papa Frida had. First of all, he tells her, we do have a jewel. It's right here. And secondly, he doesn't tell her what it is. He doesn't lord over her and tell her what it is. He encourages her to discover it for herself. If you ever think you're a father figure whose wisdom is bigger, don't lord it over the other person. It's just not nice. It's not nice and it's not effective. Give them a hint. Let them figure it out on their own. This is how the daughter, by embarking on a journey of discovery, becomes the most important character in the story. It's because of her, because she goes looking for the jewel, that everyone, the whole community, is transformed. The whole series of events is set into motion when she boasts about her father's jewel to the landlord, who tries to fill his loneliness with the purchase of yet another jewel. But that is an illusory happiness, and he loses the jewel. And when he loses the jewel, Frida's parents find it in the belly of the big fish. And because they find the jewel in the big fish, they give money to the poor, with a little left over for inviting friends to their Shabbos table. Which leads to the invitation to the landlord The landlord sitting at their table with his shiny, jewel-inlaid pocket watch. And here's that part of the story I mentioned earlier that is so important. Sitting at the table, gathered together in celebration, as I hope many of us will soon be gathered around the table with the unhoused this week, as Ed mentioned, hosting our hypothermia shelter, having that cup of coffee or that lemonade with our guests. Gathered together around the table, the true jewel is revealed. It's revealed to the growing daughter, who's growing in wisdom, but importantly, it is also revealed to the landlord. And the story tells us he joins in the singing. Can you imagine that in our story? The landlord, the 1% joining in the singing, joining the human microphone, the Wall Street tycoon standing in the crowd, echoing the words of the homeless mother standing at the podium. I know, and I wrote this in 2011, this part of this sermon. I know we aren't there yet. But let's tell this story. Let's not tell the sinking boat story, not only. That story is for another time, a time when the greedy sunk by themselves in the boats of their own making. In our time, the boat encompasses the whole planet. And if we go down, we are all going down together. So let's tell the story of Frida. Let's teach our children and our children's children this new story, this new culture-transforming story, because the only way we are getting ourselves out of the mess we're in is with everybody on board. And the only way to get everybody on board is to say, it's here. The jewel you are looking for is already here. Find it. Open your eyes and see it for yourself. I know that isn't the moment in the story we're in right now. Right now, the landlord has all the jewels and just keeps buying more. Right now, we are attempting to be the gust of wind that blows off his hat, so that at least a tiny pearl of that wealth can find its way into the hands of those most in need. But while we work to remove the hat from the heads of the con men and the crooks, let us also remember the true jewel is this very day. All of us here together, this is the real jewel, the real wealth. The real wealth is the realization that community gathered together in peace, in joy, in compassion, even in grief. That gathering together is the jewel. And it's already here, dancing between us. In the light of the candles and the fellowship at the table, Shevet Amim Gam Yahad, the beloved community gathered together as one. When we stand together in the wind, our bones turn to dark emeralds, shining and indestructible. May be so, and may we be among those who make it so.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me as we extinguish our chalice with these words from David Bombach. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we've gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world inspired to share our values. Thank you.